The 4Rs framework is a useful tool to analyze education in conflict-affected contexts, but it needs to be treated cautiously because it is not a formula which can resolve the issues relating to educational distribution, representation in the process of educational decision making, but also recognition of diversity and various groups who have different priorities, different cultures and different histories. For example, redistribution in conflict affected contexts could be facing a lot of challenges in the context where global capitalism and neoliberal policies dominate all the processes of development, trying to encourage redistributive, social justice-oriented policies, which requires additional support provided to the poor populations. But also what we know is that privatization of education is accelerated in the post-war contexts. And what that does is people who've been historically marginalized, they are not able to access the quality education that they need because the government doesn't necessarily provide financial support for the people who've been historically excluded. And we know that educational inequalities contribute to production and exacerbation of violent conflict. And therefore, in the context of a neoliberal terrain, promoting redistributive policies could be enormously challenging. With regards to representation, it is important to recognize that historically structured institutions which basically provide powers to the privileged social groups need to be reconceptualized, reconfigured, and power needs to be more equitably redistributed across different social and cultural and political groups. It challenges the hegemony of the people who have conventionally controlled power, and they always feel threatened by the reforms that require them to give away control over resources, cultures and languages and other things, because that's what basically requires that marginalized languages, cultures and groups, they need to be brought back into the equitable distribution of power. So it can actually fuel conflict rather than addressing the causes of conflict. With regards to recognition, I think marginalized communities who've been suppressed for a long period of time face the challenge of articulating their ideas and their, asserting their rights, and they need support. And honest recognition is required, and there's always sort of chance of manipulation by the privileged social groups who provide some recognition, but just in tokenistic, manner. So I think that needs to be also looked at very carefully, because obviously the hegemonic groups have the power of articulation and language, understanding of the rules and regulations, so who can very easily overpower. And the fourth R, which is reconciliation, is also problematic because there are always different interpretation of the causes of conflict and different narratives about how conflict can be transformed, and people are hugely dissatisfied because of the way that conflict has been resolved. For example, there are emotive historical narratives about conflict, and those who control power tend to promote a particular type of narrative about conflict and peace. Therefore, there's always a tendency to capture the reconciliation process, which ultimately benefits the people who have been in power conventionally, who've been, at the privileged positions. And therefore, it is possible to manipulate and misuse the 4Rs framework without producing the social justice that it aims to achieve. And policymakers, development practitioners, and academics need to treat the framework cautiously, and engage in a continuous dialogue in order to enhance the benefit of the framework, rather than accepting it as a tool which can resolve the educational problems in conflict-affected contexts.